Hi, my name's Zara. And when my father remarried after my mother's death, my stepmother convinced him I didn't belong at their wedding. I was escorted out by security, labeled a troublemaker, and left on the sidewalk like discarded wrapping paper. No explanation, no goodbye, just the hotel door closing on their own daughter. But here's the part they didn't see coming. I survived. And 7 years later, when my private jet touched down in their small town, they suddenly remembered they had a daughter after all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering that caught the afternoon light streaming through my apartment windows. Dad and Elaine request the honor of your presence. I traced my finger over the embossed letters, the paper thick and expensive between my fingertips. 3 years since Mom died, and now this. A wedding invitation that felt more like a peace offering. I should have known better. That morning, wedding day, I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing down the emerald silk dress I'd spent 2 weeks' worth of barista tips on. At 22, I was still figuring out adulthood, balancing community college classes with shifts at Moonbeam Coffee, living in a studio apartment with pipes that groaned at midnight and neighbors who argued in Spanish until dawn. But I'd made an effort for Dad. Hair twisted into an elegant knot, silver earrings Mom had left me, makeup subtle but precise. "You look beautiful, honey," my roommate Jade said from the doorway, coffee mug in hand. "Your dad's going to be proud." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dad and I had drifted since Mom's cancer took her. He'd fallen into grief, then into Elaine's waiting arms 6 months later. She was everything Mom wasn't, loud, polished, with a laugh that commanded attention and a way of looking at me like I was a math problem she couldn't quite solve. "Just remember," Jade continued, "you're there for your dad. Whatever Elaine says or does." "I know," I cut in. "Water off a duck's." Far's the Grand Summit Hotel loomed like a giant wedding cake, all white stone and cascading flowers. I clutched my small gift, a vintage pocket watch I'd found at an antique store, restored to working condition, and made my way through the revolving doors. The lobby buzzed with guests in formal wear, champagne glasses in hand, voices creating a symphony of excitement. I spotted my cousin Mina near the ballroom entrance and waved. Her face brightened, then oddly fell. She hurried over, her bridesmaid dress swishing around her ankles. "Zara," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "I didn't think you'd come." My smile faltered. "Dad invited me. Why wouldn't I?" She bit her lip. "It's just, Elaine was saying, 'There you are.'" A voice cut through our conversation, sharp as a blade. Elaine stood behind us, radiant in white, her red hair swept into an elaborate updo adorned with pearls. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Zara, what a surprise." I stepped forward, forcing my lips into a curve. "Congratulations, Elaine. The venue is beautiful." "Thank you." She tilted her head, appraising me with cool detachment. "But there seems to be a misunderstanding. The invitation was a courtesy, not an expectation." The ballroom behind her swirled with laughter and music. Through the open doors, I caught a glimpse of Dad adjusting his tie, surrounded by his golf buddies, his face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen since before Mom got sick. "I don't understand," I said, the gift box suddenly heavy in my hands. "Your father and I agreed that today should be uncomplicated." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Your presence would only remind him of Patricia, and we've worked so hard to move forward." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "Dad said that? He wants today to be perfect." She placed a manicured hand on my arm, her grip tight. "Surely you understand. You've already caused enough pain with your rebellious phase after your mother died." "Rebellious phase?" Is that what they called my grief? The nights I'd cried myself sick, the days I'd skipped school because I couldn't bear to function, the one time I'd been caught shoplifting a bottle of Mom's perfume from the department store just to have her scent again? I need to speak to my father, I said, pulling away from her touch. Elaine's smile tightened. He's busy with photographs. I'm sorry, Zara, but I have to insist. She nodded to someone behind me. I turned to find two men in dark suits, hotel security, standing with apologetic expressions. This young lady needs to be escorted out, Elaine said, her voice honey-sweet. She's not on the approved guest list. That's not true, I protested, looking desperately toward Mina, who stood frozen, eyes wide. My father invited me. I have the invitation. But Elaine had already turned away, gliding back toward the celebration, a vision in white against the glittering backdrop of chandeliers and flowers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Miss, please come with us, one of the security guards said quietly. We don't want to cause a scene. I'm not causing a scene. I'm trying to attend my father's wedding. My voice rose despite my best intentions. Heads turned. Whispers started. The security guards each took one of my elbows, gentle but firm. Please, miss. I looked past them, searching for Dad's familiar face in the crowd, hoping he'd appear and stop this nightmare. But the only faces I saw were strangers and distant relatives, wearing expressions of pity or morbid interest. My chest tightened. Air refused to fill my lungs properly. I clutched the gift box to my chest like armor as they led me across the lobby, past curious onlookers and whispering hotel staff. The revolving door spun, and suddenly I was outside, the summer heat hitting my face like an open oven. I'm sorry, miss, one guard said, genuinely remorseful, just following instructions. They left me there on the sidewalk, the sounds of celebration muffled behind glass and concrete. I stood, stunned, watching as they disappeared back inside. A valet gave me a curious look. A couple entered the hotel, stepping around me like I was an inconvenient piece of furniture. I don't know how long I stood there, still holding the gift, my emerald dress now feeling like a costume I'd foolishly worn to the wrong party. My phone buzzed in my purse. Jade. How's the wedding? Her text read. I couldn't answer. Instead, I walked, past the line of luxury cars waiting for valet service, past the hotel gardens where a photographer was capturing another wedding party, past the point where my heels started to pinch and my eyes began to burn. At a bench, near the hotel's fountain, I finally sat down. The box in my hands seemed to mock me. I opened it, looking at the pocket watch nestled on velvet. The inscription I'd had engraved inside the lid caught the sunlight. Time reveals the truth of love. Congratulations, Dad. A laugh escaped my throat, bitter and sharp. Time had certainly revealed some truths today. My phone buzzed again. Mina this time. Are you okay? I can't believe what just happened. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched. The fountain water dance and sparkle, indifferent to my humiliation. Guests streamed in and out of the hotel, each absorbed in their own joy or purpose. None of them knew or cared that my world had just imploded. Miss, are you all right? A woman in a hotel uniform stood before me, concern in her eyes. Fine, I managed. Just taking a break. She nodded, unconvinced. Would you like me to call you a taxi? A taxi, right. Because I couldn't sit here forever in my stupid emerald dress, holding a gift nobody wanted. Yes, I whispered. Please. The ride back to my apartment passed. In a blur. Streets and buildings melted together beyond the taxi window as I fought to keep my composure. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why someone dressed for a wedding was quietly falling apart in his back seat. When I finally reached my apartment building, a converted warehouse with exposed pipes and questionable heating, my legs barely carried me up the 3 flights of stairs. I fumbled with my keys, the hallway tilting strangely around me. Jade was on the couch when I entered, textbooks spread around her. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Zara? What happened? You look like—" "They kicked me out," I said, the words stinging my throat. "Security escorted me out of my own father's wedding." Jade stood, books tumbling to the floor. "What? Why?" "Apparently, I'm a reminder of Mom, a complication." I dropped onto the couch, kicking off my heels. Elaine didn't want me there. And Dad didn't even come to find me. Jade sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders. "I'm going to kill him. Both of them." I shook my head, tears finally breaking free. "He's all the family I have left, Jade, and he chose her. He chose to let me be thrown out like garbage." "That's not true," she said fiercely. "You have me, and your aunt, Tessa, and friends who actually give a damn." I nodded, but the hole in my chest only seemed to widen. Jade went to the kitchen, returning with a bottle of tequila and 2 shot glasses. She poured with military precision. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "The ones we choose, not the ones who fail us." The liquor burned down my throat, momentarily eclipsing the pain in my heart. I reached for my phone, scrolling to Dad's number, thumb hovering over the call button. "Don't," Jade warned. "Not tonight. Not when you're hurt." She was right, of course. Nothing good would come from that call. But something inside me needed to know if he'd been part of the decision or merely complicit through silence. I typed a single text. "I came to celebrate with you. Why didn't you stop them from throwing me out?" I hit send before I could think better of it. The message showed as delivered, then read. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, a response. "I'm sorry, Zara. Elaine thought it best. We'll talk after the honeymoon." The phone slipped from my fingers, onto the couch. Not a denial. Not outrage that I'd been mistreated. Just an apology that felt more like formality than remorse, and a promise of a conversation pushed into some nebulous future. "Zara?" Jade's voice seemed to come from far away. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew, and he let it happen." That night, after Jade had gone to bed and the apartment fell silent except for the hum of the ancient refrigerator, I sat on the fire escape outside my window. The city sprawled before me, a constellation of lights against the darkness. Somewhere out there, Dad and Elaine were celebrating their union, surrounded by people who weren't complications, who didn't remind them of painful pasts. I wrapped Mom's old cardigan tighter around my shoulders. The stars above were faint against the city glow, but I searched for them anyway, remembering how Mom used to point them out when I was small. "Even when you can't see them clearly," she'd say, "they're still there, still burning, still true." My phone buzzed with another text from Mina. "Just checking on you. Reception's winding down. Everyone's asking where you went, but Elaine told them you weren't feeling well and had to leave. Dad's mad at me, but I mentioned I saw you getting escorted out. Call me when you can." At least someone had noticed. At least someone had spoken up. The pocket watch sat heavy in my lap, its ticking a steady rhythm against the chaotic thumping of my heart. I opened it, tracing the inscription with my fingertip. "Time reveals the truth of love." Mom had always said that actions speak louder than words, that time shows who truly stands by you. Today had certainly been revealing. I closed the watch with a snap. There on the fire escape, with the city breathing below me and the stars hidden, but present above, I made a decision. This pain, this rejection, it wouldn't define me. It would fuel me. "Watch me," I whispered to the night. "Just watch what I become without you." The next morning, I called in sick to Moonbeam Coffee. My manager, Danny, didn't ask questions. She'd seen enough of life's rough edges to recognize the hoarse voice of someone who'd cried until dawn. I spent the day in bed, phone turned off, curtains drawn, existing in a cocoon of silence. By evening, though, the quiet had become oppressive. I forced myself to shower, to eat something besides stale crackers, to face the reality that life continued despite personal catastrophes. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, flooded with notifications. 3 missed calls from Mina. 1 from Aunt Tessa. A voicemail from my community college advisor about an upcoming registration deadline. And a text from an unknown number. This is Elaine. I hope you understand yesterday was for the best. Your father needs a fresh start. I know we can all be civil adults about this. Civil adults. As if throwing someone out of a wedding was the height of civility. I deleted the message without responding. Jade found me at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, scrolling through job listings. "What are you doing?" she asked, dropping her backpack on a chair. "Looking for a real job," I said without looking up. "Something better than making lattes. Something that can get me out of here." She sat across from me, concern etched on her face. "Zara, you don't have to make big decisions right now. You're upset, and that's—" "I'm not just upset," I interrupted. "I'm awake. For the first time since Mom died, I see everything clearly. I've been waiting for Dad to be my family again, to be the person he was before. But he's gone, Jade. That version of him is gone, and I need to stop waiting for him to come back." She studied me for a long moment. "Okay, so what's the plan?" I turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was an application for a marketing internship at Vertex Industries in Chicago. Paid, full-time, with potential for permanent placement. "Chicago?" Jade's eyebrows shot up. "That's 12 hours away." "Exactly." I met her gaze. "Far enough that I can't keep looking over my shoulder, hoping Dad will change his mind." "But your classes—" "I can transfer credits. Chicago has plenty of colleges." Jade leaned back, arms crossed. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." The determination in my voice surprised even me. "I need a fresh start too, and I'm going to build something so good, so undeniably successful, that one day they'll look at what I've become and regret every moment they treated me like I was disposable." "Revenge success?" A small smile played at her lips. I shrugged. "Call it what you want. I call it survival." That night, I completed the internship application, rewrote my resume 3 times, and crafted a cover letter that carefully balanced confidence with hunger. I attached my portfolio, small projects I'd done for local businesses, designs I'd created for campus events, a social media campaign I'd volunteered to run for a neighborhood cleanup. At 2 a.m., finger hovering over the submit button, I hesitated. Was I really ready to leave everything behind? My apartment, my job, my few friends, the familiar streets and coffee shops and bookstores that had been my world? But then I remembered the feeling of those security guards' hands on my elbows, the sight of Dad laughing with his friends while I was being removed from his celebration, the cold text message that offered excuses instead of protection. I hit submit. 2 weeks later, as I was wiping down the espresso machine at the end of my shift, my phone rang with an unknown Chicago number. I answered, stepping into the back room for quiet. "Hello? Is this Zara Mitchell? This is Amara Okafor from Vertex Industries." By the time the call ended, my hands were shaking. The internship was mine, if I could start in 2 weeks. Danny found me sitting on a milk crate, staring at my phone like it might explode. "Bad news?" she asked, untying her apron. "Good news, actually." My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "I got an internship. In Chicago." Her face lit up. "Zara, that's amazing." Then, noting my expression, "Isn't it?" "It is. It's just—" "How real. Suddenly very real." She sat on another crate beside me. "You know what my grandma always said? When the door you've been knocking on finally opens, don't stand there questioning whether you should go through it." I laughed softly. "Your grandma sounds wise." "Wise and ornery as hell." She nudged my shoulder. "So when do you leave?" 2 weeks. She whistled. "Well, let me know if you need help packing, or drinking, or both simultaneously." The next 14 days passed in a whirlwind of logistics. Subletting my room to one of Jade's classmates, selling furniture I couldn't take, transferring to an online program through my community college until I could enroll in Chicago, setting up automatic transfers to continue paying my share of utilities, until Jade found a permanent roommate. Through it all, my phone remained conspicuously silent from the one person who might have cared that I was leaving town. Dad and Elaine were in Bali for their honeymoon, according to Mina's updates. I tried to convince myself it was better this way. A clean break, no messy goodbyes, no chance for more rejection. The night before my departure, Jade insisted on a small gathering. Just a few friends, takeout from our favorite Thai place, and enough reminiscing to make the tiny apartment feel like the most important place in the world. "To Zara," Jade said, raising her plastic cup of cheap wine. "Who's about to show Chicago what resilience looks like?" Everyone cheered. I smiled, fighting the lump in my throat. These people, they'd been my lifeline after Mom died, after Dad retreated into his grief and then into Elaine's world. They'd picked me up off bathroom floors when panic attacks hit, brought me soup when depression left me unable to cook, celebrated tiny victories when I started functioning again. "I'm going to miss you all so much," I admitted. "We'll visit," promised Cal, my study partner from English Lit. "Chicago's got great museums. And I expect detailed reports on all the hot Midwesterners," added Marco, who'd been trying to set me up on dates since freshman year. Later, after everyone had gone and Jade had fallen asleep on the couch surrounded by empty takeout containers, I slipped out onto the fire escape one last time. The city I'd grown up in spread before me, familiar as my own reflection. Every street held memories, some with Mom, some with Dad from before, some I'd made on my own during these difficult years. I pulled Mom's cardigan around me, breathing, in the faint scent that still clung to it after all this time. "I'm scared," I whispered, as if she could hear me. "But I think you'd tell me to go anyway." The stars winked above, distant but constant. In my pocket, the weight of the pocket watch pressed against my leg. I'd decided to keep it after all, not as a gift for Dad, but as a reminder to myself. Time reveals the truth of love, and sometimes it reveals the strength you didn't know you had. Morning came too quickly. My suitcases, just 2, containing everything I couldn't bear to leave behind, waited by the door. Jade stood in her pajamas, eyes red-rimmed, but smile determined. "Text me when you get there," she insisted, hugging me fiercely. "And if it sucks, if anything goes wrong, you come right back. Your room will be waiting." "I will," I promised, though we both knew I wouldn't. Whatever happened in Chicago, I had to make it work. There was no safety net, no fallback plan. The taxi honked outside. One last hug, one last look around the apartment, and then I was in the back seat, watching my old life recede through the rear window. At the train station, as I waited on the platform with my suitcases at my feet, my phone buzzed with a text. "Dad. Just landed back in the country. Heard from Mina you're leaving town today. Call me when you can." No mention of the wedding incident, no acknowledgement of the hurt he'd caused. Just a casual request, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't spent the last month reconstructing my entire life because of his choices. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on a simple truth. "My train's about to leave. I'll be in touch when I'm settled." The train arrived, doors sliding open with a pneumatic hiss. I boarded, found my seat, watched the platform disappear as we pulled away. Whatever came next, I was facing it alone. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Chicago greeted me with a bitter wind that cut through my thin jacket like it was made of tissue paper. The city loomed massive and indifferent around me as I dragged my suitcases from Union Station, buildings stretching toward a steel-gray sky that promised snow before November ended. Nothing like the temperate climate I'd left behind. "You must be Zara," a voice called out. A woman approached, wrapped in a proper winter coat, bright yellow scarf contrasting against her dark skin. "I'm Amara. We spoke on the phone." I extended my hand, trying to hide how it trembled from both cold and nerves. "Thank you for meeting me." Couldn't let our new intern navigate the L system with luggage on day one. She smiled, warm and genuine. "The company apartment is ready for you. It's not glamorous, but it's close to the office and included in your internship package." Company apartment. The word sounded impossibly adult, impossibly real. Just 3 weeks ago, I'd been making lattes and living in a cramped studio with Jade. Now I was following Amara into a taxi, heading toward a life I'd cobbled together out of determination and spite. The apartment was on the 14th floor of a converted industrial building in the West Loop. One bedroom, exposed brick walls, windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was clean, furnished with basics, and most importantly, mine. No roommates, no memories, no ghosts of a family that had decided I was dispensable. "Orientation starts tomorrow at 9, Amara said, handing me a key card. "Try to get some rest. Chicago has a way of overwhelming newcomers." After she left, I stood in the center of the empty living room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new home. Distant sirens, the rumble of the elevated train, the building's ancient heating system clanking to life. The silence between these noises felt vast and accusatory. What had I done? I'd left everything familiar for a city where I knew no one, for an internship that might not lead anywhere, all because I couldn't bear to stay where I wasn't wanted. My phone buzzed. "Jade. Did you make it? Is Chicago still standing? Or did you conquer it already?" The text made me smile despite the knot in my stomach. I sent back a quick, "Made it. Apartment is good. Terrified for tomorrow." Then, before I could overthink it, I texted Mina. "Landed in Chicago. New number, in case you need it." I didn't text Dad back. Let him wonder. Let him sit with the silence I'd been given at the wedding. That first night, I slept fitfully on sheets that smelled of industrial detergent rather than the lavender fabric softener Jade always used. Dreams chased me, standing outside the wedding venue, knocking on doors that wouldn't open, running down endless hotel corridors while voices murmured behind closed doors. I woke before dawn, disoriented in the strange room. For a moment, panic clawed at my throat. Where was I? What had I done? Then reality seeped back in with the weak morning light filtering through blinds I hadn't fully closed. Chicago. Vertex Industries. A new beginning. I made coffee in the small kitchen, standing by the window as I sipped it, watching the city wake up 14 floors below. People hurried along sidewalks, breath visible in the cold air, each focused on their own destination, their own purpose. Soon I would join them, just another anonymous figure with somewhere to be. The thought was both terrifying and freeing. Vertex Industries occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The lobby featured sleek furnishings, living walls, of greenery, and a reception desk that looked like it had been carved from a single slab of marble. I adjusted my blazer, thrifted but well-tailored, and approached with what I hoped was professional confidence. "Zara Mitchell," I told the receptionist. "I'm starting the marketing internship today." She smiled, handing me a visitor badge. "Welcome to Vertex. Take the elevator to 32. Amara's expecting you." The elevator whisked me upward with disorienting speed. When the doors opened, I stepped into a space that looked more like a trendy cafe than an office. Open-plan seating, colorful furniture groupings, walls covered in whiteboards filled with diagrams and notes. People moved purposefully between areas, some talking animatedly, others focused intently on laptops or tablets. Amara appeared at my elbow. "Right on time. Come meet the team." What followed was a blur of names, titles, and handshakes. The marketing department consisted of 12 people, each specializing in different aspects of the company's communication strategy. My role would be supporting all of them, learning each area before finding my niche. "And this is Dominic," Amara said, introducing me to a man with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes behind stylish glasses. "Our creative director. You'll be working closely with him on the new product launch." Dominic assessed me with a quick glance that seemed to take in everything from my carefully chosen outfit to the nervous way I clutched my portfolio. "You're the one with the neighborhood cleanup campaign," he said. "Good eye for authentic messaging. We need that." I blinked, surprised he'd actually looked at my portfolio. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Wait until you see what we're up against." By lunchtime, my head was spinning with information. Vertex specialized in sustainable technology solutions, currently preparing to launch a revolutionary water filtration system for regions with limited infrastructure. My job would involve helping craft messaging that resonated with both investors and communities who would benefit from the technology. It was challenging, meaningful work, a far cry from remembering coffee orders and wiping down tables. "Keeping up okay?" Amara asked as we grabbed sandwiches from the company cafe. "I think so," I said. "It's a lot to absorb." "That's why we start interns with a rotation through all departments. Find your strengths before we throw you into the deep end." "I appreciate the chance," I said, then added more quietly, "especially since my degree isn't even finished yet." Amara shrugged. "Dominic doesn't care about paper credentials. He saw something in your application materials, a perspective we needed." She took a bite of her sandwich. "So, what brought you to Chicago? Most people aren't eager to arrive just as winter's setting in." I hesitated, unsure how much of my personal drama was appropriate to share with a new colleague. "Needed a change," I said finally. "Family situation made staying complicated." She nodded, not pressing further. "Well, Chicago's good for reinvention. This city doesn't care who you were before, just what you're bringing to the table now." I liked that idea. Being evaluated solely on my contributions, not my history, not the family that had decided I wasn't worth keeping. That evening, I returned to my apartment exhausted but buzzing with a strange energy. The day had been overwhelming but also exhilarating. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I hadn't thought about Dad or Elaine for hours at a stretch. Instead, my mind had been filled with project timelines, marketing strategies, and the faces of my new coworkers. As I heated a frozen dinner in the microwave, still hadn't grocery shopped properly, my phone rang. Dad's number. I stared at the screen, heart suddenly racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to give him the same silence he'd given me when I'd needed him most. But another part, a part I wasn't proud of, still craved his approval, his acknowledgement. After 4 rings, I answered. "Hello? Zara." His voice sounded both familiar and strange. "You didn't tell me you were moving to Chicago." "No. How are you?" "No, I miss you." Just an accusation disguised as concern. "I didn't think you'd be interested," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You've been busy with the honeymoon." A pause. "Of course I'm interested. You're my daughter." The words hit like a slap. "Am I? Because when your wife had me thrown out of your wedding, you didn't seem to remember that." Zara, that's not fair. The situation was complicated? No, Dad, it wasn't complicated at all. I showed up to celebrate with you. Elaine decided I wasn't welcome. You went along with it. That's actually remarkably simple. I could hear him sigh, could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose the way he did when frustrated. We should talk about this in person. When are you coming back to visit? I'm not. The words came out before I'd fully formed the thought. I have an internship here, a new start. But your classes? I've transferred to online courses. I'm figuring it out. Another pause, longer this time. I wish you'd discuss this with me before making such a big decision. I almost laughed. Like you discussed having me removed from your wedding? That's not the same thing, and you know it. Isn't it? You made a choice that affected me without consulting me. I've done the same. The difference is my choice only impacts my life, not yours. Zara. I have to go, Dad. I have work tomorrow. I ended the call before he could respond. Before I could weaken and apologize for my tone. Before I could slip back into the familiar pattern of smoothing things over to keep the peace. My microwave dinner had gone cold. I ate it anyway, standing by the window, watching lights flicker on across the city as darkness fell. The conversation replayed in my head, each word turning over like a stone hiding something underneath. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't even acknowledged that what happened was wrong. Instead, he'd tried to make my departure the issue, as if I'd betrayed him by seeking a fresh start. I texted Jade. Dad called, acted like I owed him an explanation for leaving. Her response came quickly. Did you tell him where to shove his entitlement? I smiled despite the heaviness in my chest. Something like that. Later, lying in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new building, I realized something important. For the first time since Mom died, I'd stood my ground with Dad. I hadn't acquiesced to make him comfortable. I hadn't shrunk myself to fit into the space he was willing to allow me. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. Like the first step on a very long road. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Days at Vertex learning the intricate dance of corporate marketing. Evenings exploring my new neighborhood or catching up on coursework. Weekends were for venturing further into the city, discovering hidden bookstores, neighborhood cafes, and the vast expanse of Lake Michigan, beautiful even in winter, with ice forming along the shoreline like lace. I wasn't exactly making friends yet, but I was building connections. Amara invited me to a marketing mixer where I met professionals from other companies. Dominic recommended me for a small team developing messaging for a sustainability conference. My contributions were noticed. My ideas sometimes implemented. You have good instincts, Dominic told me after I'd presented a concept for reaching rural communities. You understand that people don't connect with technical specifications. They connect with how technology changes their daily reality. His approval meant more than I wanted to admit. In some ways, he reminded me of Mom. Straightforward, passionate about meaningful work, unimpressed by pretense. December arrived with biting winds and the city's transformation into a holiday. Wonderland. Magnificent Mile glittered with lights. Store windows featured elaborate displays, and a massive Christmas tree dominated Millennium Park. The beauty was almost painful to witness alone. Any plans for the holidays? Amara asked one afternoon. As we worked late on a presentation, I shook my head. Just catching up on sleep, probably. No family to visit? Not really. I kept my focus on my laptop screen, hoping she wouldn't press. She was quiet for a moment. My family does an open house on Christmas Eve. Nothing fancy, just food and conversation. You'd be welcome to join. The invitation caught me off guard. That's really kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude. It's not an intrusion if you're invited. She smiled. Think about it. No pressure. That night, I called Jade. suddenly homesick for the first time since arriving in Chicago. The whole city looks like a Hallmark movie, I told her. It's ridiculous. Sounds magical, she said. You should take pictures. I will. I paused. Have you heard anything about Dad and Elaine? Jade hesitated. They're back from the honeymoon. I saw them at the grocery store last week. Didn't speak to them. And they didn't ask about me? Zara. It's fine. I was just curious. But it wasn't fine. Despite everything, despite the hurt and anger, part of me had hoped Dad would make some grand gesture of reconciliation, a call that went beyond passive-aggressive questioning, a visit. Something to show he recognized what had been broken. Instead, there was just silence. Occasional texts that skirted around the real issues. Once, a deposit in my bank account with the note for winter clothes, which I promptly transferred back. I didn't need his money. I needed him to acknowledge what had happened, to take responsibility for letting me be excluded from one of the most important days of his life. As Christmas approached, the office grew quieter, more people taking time off to be with family. I volunteered to cover some of their responsibilities, grateful for the distraction. On December 23rd, I was alone in the marketing department, finalizing materials for a January presentation when Dominic appeared at my desk. Still here? He asked, eyebrows raised. It's nearly 7. I looked up, surprised by both his presence and the time. Just finishing some slides. What about you? Forgot? My tablet. He studied me for a moment. You've been putting in a lot of extra hours. I shrugged. I like being busy. He leaned against the edge of my desk. You know, when I first started in this industry, I worked every holiday for 3 years straight. Told myself it was dedication, ambition. And it wasn't? Oh, it was partly that, but mostly it was easier than facing an empty apartment. His expression softened. Whatever you're running from, Mitchell, it'll still be there when you close your laptop. I felt exposed, transparent. I'm not running from anything. He smiled, not unkindly. Sure. Well, take tomorrow off at least. That's an order from management. After he left, I sat in the empty office, his words echoing. Was I running? Or building something new? Maybe both were true. I texted Amara. Is that Christmas Eve invitation still open? Christmas Eve at Amara's family home was chaos of the most wonderful kind. Her parents had emigrated from Nigeria decades ago, bringing traditions that blended seamlessly with American holiday customs. Their home in a Chicago suburb was filled with relatives of all ages, friends from every walk of life, and enough food to feed twice the number of people present. You came. Amara hugged me when I arrived, taking the bottle of wine I'd brought. Come meet everyone. Everyone turned out to be at least 30 people, each warmer and more welcoming than the last. Amara's mother insisted I try every dish. Her father told stories that had the whole room laughing, and her younger siblings immediately adopted me into their card game tournament. No one asked why I wasn't with my own family. No one made me feel like an outsider or an afterthought. I was simply accepted into the fold, another person to feed, another laugh to add to the chorus filling the cozy home. Near midnight, as the celebration continued around us, Amara found me in a quiet corner of the kitchen. Doing okay? She asked. It can be a lot. It's wonderful, I said honestly. Thank you for including me. She smiled. That's what the holidays should be, gathering everyone who needs somewhere to belong. Later, riding the L back to Y, my apartment, I felt something shift inside me. The sharp edges of my pain hadn't disappeared, but they seemed less all-consuming. I'd spent an evening surrounded by a family that showed me what love looked like in action, not just in words or obligations, but in the simple act of making space for others at the table. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Merry Christmas, Zara. Thinking of you." For once, the message didn't provoke anger or hurt. Instead, I felt a strange sort of pity. He was missing out on knowing the person I was becoming. That was his loss, not mine. I typed back, "Merry Christmas," and left it at that. As winter gradually released its grip on Chicago, I found myself putting down roots. My apartment began to feel like home. Throw pillows on the couch, art on the walls, plants on the windowsills. I discovered favorite coffee shops, bookstores, and walking paths. I joined a community garden planning committee and volunteered at a literacy program in a nearby elementary school. My internship at Vertex shifted from temporary to promising. Dominic assigned me increasingly significant projects, and my ideas were implemented with growing frequency. When Amara mentioned that there might be a permanent position opening in the summer, I allowed myself to hope. "You've got a good shot," she told me over lunch. "Dominic's impressed, and he doesn't impress easily." "I've learned so much here," I said. "More than I ever would have back home." She studied me over her salad. "You know, in the 3 months you've been here, you've never really talked about where you came from." I hesitated, toying with my water glass. "There's not much to tell." "Everyone has a story, Zara." Her tone was gentle. "And whatever yours is, it doesn't define you, but it is part of you." That evening, I sat on my windowsill watching the sunset paint the city in gold and purple, thinking about Amara's words. I'd been so focused on escaping my past that I'd refused to acknowledge how it had shaped me. My phone lit up with a text from Mina. "Hey, stranger. Just checking in. Miss you." Impulsively, I called her instead of texting back. She answered on the second ring, surprise evident in her voice. "Zara, I didn't expect... it's good to hear from you." "How are you?" I asked, suddenly realizing how much I'd missed her. "Good. Busy with classes. How's the Windy City treating you?" We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on the mundane details of our lives. She told me about her classes, her new boyfriend, the stray cat she'd adopted. I told her about Vertex, my tiny apartment, the vastness of Lake Michigan. Neither of us mentioned Dad or Elaine until the very end. "They ask about you sometimes," Mina said hesitantly. "Your dad, especially." "What do you tell them?" "Just that I think you're doing well, that you seem happier." I considered this. Am I? Happier? You tell me. I looked around my apartment, small but mine, filled with evidence of the life I was building. I think I am, not all the time, but more than before. After we hung up, I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not to Dad, not to anyone but myself. I wrote about the wedding day, the humiliation, the pain of rejection. I wrote about running away to Chicago, about fear and loneliness and gradual rebirth. I wrote until my hand cramped and tears blurred the ink. When I finally put down the pen, something had loosened in my chest. The past wasn't gone, but maybe it didn't need to be. Maybe it could simply be one chapter in a much longer story, one that I was still writing, one sentence, one day, one choice at a time. Spring arrived with a gentleness that surprised me after Chicago's harsh winter. The city transformed as trees budded along the streets, flowers appeared in parks, and people emerged from winter hibernation with visible relief. At Vertex, the pace accelerated as we prepared for a major product launch. I found myself in the center of the marketing effort, coordinating between departments, attending planning meetings with Dominic, and even contributing to strategic decisions. We need to emphasize the human impact, I argued during one particularly heated meeting. The technical specs are impressive, but they don't tell the story of what this means for communities without clean water access. Dominic nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. Exactly what I've been saying. Mitchell, I want you to lead the messaging development on this angle. After the meeting, he stopped me in the hallway. Good work in there. You've come a long way since you arrived. Thank you, I said, surprised by the compliment. I've had good teachers. No false modesty, he said with a shake of his head. You brought something valuable with you, a perspective we needed. He paused. The position Amara mentioned, it's officially open. I expect your application on my desk by Friday. As he walked away, I stood frozen, processing what had just happened. A permanent position at Vertex, a chance to truly establish myself in this new life I was creating. That night, I called Jade to share the news. I knew it, she crowed. I told you they'd be idiots not to keep you. I haven't got the job yet, I reminded her, but couldn't keep the excitement from my voice. Please, it's basically yours already. She paused. I'm really proud of you, Z. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something amazing. Her words settled around me like a warm blanket. I miss you, I admitted. I miss you too, but maybe I could visit. See this fancy Chicago life you've built? I'd love that. After we hung up, I curled up on my window seat, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge how far I'd come. From the devastated girl standing outside her father's wedding, to a young woman building a career, creating connections, finding her voice. I still carried scars from that day. The rejection, the public humiliation, the betrayal by the one person who should have protected me. But those scars no longer defined me. They were simply part of the landscape of my life, like the weathered brick of my apartment building, evidence of storms weathered, of resilience forged through difficulty. I opened my laptop and began working on my application for the permanent position at Vertex. As I outlined my contributions and vision for the role, I realized I was no longer running from something. I was running toward something. Something I was building for myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. And for now, that was enough. Congratulations, Mitchell. The position is yours. Dominic slid a contract across his desk, his expression characteristically unreadable despite the good news he'd just delivered. I stared at the document, my name printed in bold at the top, the Vertex Industries logo embossed in the corner. Thank you, I managed, fingers trembling slightly as I reached for the papers. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Something almost paternal flickered across his face. You've earned this. Remember that. Outside his office, I pressed the contract to my chest, breathing deeply to steady myself. Senior Marketing Strategist. A real title, a real salary, benefits, stock options, all the trappings of the adult life I'd been pretending to have for the past 6 months. Amara spotted me and grinned. He told you. I knew it would be you. I can't quite believe it, I admitted as she pulled me into a quick hug. Believe it. We fought over you in the selection meeting. I've never seen Dominic so adamant about a candidate. That evening, I celebrated alone in my apartment, splurging on expensive takeout and a bottle of champagne I couldn't really afford. I set up my laptop on the kitchen counter and video called Jade, who squealed and demanded I show her the contract. Look at that salary, she gasped. Zara, you're officially killing it. I laughed, warmth spreading through me at her genuine excitement. It still feels surreal. It shouldn't. You've worked your ass off. She took a sip of her own drink, thousands of miles away. So what's next for Chicago's rising marketing star? I hesitated. Actually, there's something I haven't told you yet. Her expression grew serious. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's just, the product launch I've been working on, it's happening in Singapore next month. And I'm going. The words tumbled out in a rush. Dominic wants me to lead the presentation team. Jade's eyes widened. Singapore? As in, halfway around the world Singapore? I nodded, still processing it myself. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. It's a huge opportunity to establish international partnerships. Wow, international business travel. Look at you, collecting passport stamps while the rest of us are still trying to figure out our student loans. We chatted a while longer, but after hanging up, I sat on my window seat watching the city lights with mixed emotions. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this life. The job, the travel opportunity, the independence I'd built. Yet alongside the pride was a persistent ache, a quiet voice that whispered, "Who will you share these victories with?" My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Mina mentioned your new position. Congratulations. I always knew you were capable of great things." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Our communication had been sporadic at best over the past months, brief texts on birthdays and holidays, the occasional photo he'd send of places he and Elaine visited. Surface-level interaction that carefully avoided any mention of the wedding day or the hurt that still lingered between us. Finally, I typed, "Thank you," and left it at that. The Singapore trip approached with dizzying speed. Suddenly, my days were filled with presentation rehearsals, strategy sessions, and crash courses in international business etiquette. Dominic was demanding but supportive, pushing me to refine every slide, every talking point. "You're representing not just Vertex, but a vision for global change," he reminded me. "Own that responsibility." The night before my departure, I packed methodically, checking items off a list I'd made weeks ago. Professional attire for meetings, comfortable clothes for the long flight, adapters for my electronics. The practical tasks kept me grounded when my mind threatened to spin with anxiety about the journey ahead. As I folded my last sweater into the suitcase, my phone rang. Mina's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I zipped the luggage closed. "What's up?" "Just wanted to wish you good luck before your big trip," she said. "And to tell you Dad's been asking about you a lot lately." I froze. "What do you mean, a lot?" "He saw some article online about Vertex's expansion into Southeast Asia. Your name was mentioned. He's been, I don't know, different since then. More thoughtful. He asked me for your address in Chicago." A knot formed in my stomach. "Did you give it to him?" "No. I figured that should be your call." She paused. "Zara, I think he misses you. Really misses you. Not just the idea of having a daughter. He has a funny way of showing it," I muttered, but the anger that usually accompanied thoughts of Dad felt duller, more distant. "People can change," Mina said gently. "Even stubborn, emotionally constipated uncles." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, contemplating her words. Could people truly change? Or did they just get better at disguising the same old patterns? I didn't have answers, and tomorrow I'd be on a plane to the other side of the world. Whatever was happening, with Dad would have to wait. Singapore was a revelation, a gleaming metropolis of impossible architecture and lush greenery, where ancient traditions blended seamlessly with cutting-edge innovation. From my hotel room 40 floors above the city, I watched boats glide across the harbor at dawn, the sky painted in pastels behind the iconic skyline. "First time in Asia?" asked Amara, who'd traveled with the presentation team. I nodded, still taking in the view. "It's not what I expected. It's more everything." She laughed. "Wait until you see the gardens by the bay, like something from another planet." The business portion of the trip was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. Days filled with presentations, meetings with potential partners, demonstrations of the water filtration technology. I spoke to rooms full of executives, government, officials, and NGO representatives, explaining how Vertex's innovation could transform access to clean water in remote regions. To my surprise, I thrived under the pressure. All those months of preparation, of steeping myself in the company's vision, paid off in presentations that resonated with our international audience. Even Dominic seemed impressed, nodding approvingly. From the back of conference rooms as I fielded complex questions with confidence. "You're a natural," he told me after a particularly successful meeting with Singaporean investors. "You connect with people, make them believe in possibilities." I smiled, recognizing the rare compliment for what it was. "I believe in what we're doing. That makes it easier to convince others." After the formal business concluded, we had 3 days to explore the city. Amara and I wandered through temples and markets, ate at hawker centers where the food defied description, and marveled at the gardens by the bay with their super trees illuminated against the night sky. On our last evening, sitting at a rooftop bar with Singapore spread out below us like a carpet of lights, Amara raised her glass. "To new horizons," she said, literal and figurative. I clinked my glass against hers. "And to the people who help us reach them." She studied me over the rim of her cocktail. "You know, when you first arrived in Chicago, I wondered if you'd stay. There was something transient about you, like you were just passing through. And now? Now you seem rooted, present." She smiled. "It suits you." Later, alone in my hotel room packing for the journey home, I thought about her observation. She was right. I had arrived in Chicago like a refugee, carrying little but hurt and determination. Now, less than a year later, I had built something real, a career, friendships, a life that existed on its own terms, not in relation to what I'd left behind. The realization felt significant, worthy of marking somehow. On impulse, I opened my laptop and navigated to a jewelry website I'd bookmarked. Months ago, a small gold pendant caught my eye, a tiny compass rose, elegant in its simplicity. I ordered it with expedited shipping to my Chicago address. A reminder of the journey taken and the direction found. The flight home was long, giving me time to reflect on how much had changed since I'd fled to Chicago with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. I thought about the girl I'd been then, wounded, angry, determined to prove something to the people who had rejected me. That motivation had served its purpose, providing the initial push I'd needed to reinvent myself. But somewhere along the way, the focus had shifted. I wasn't building this life to spite Dad and Elaine anymore. I was building it for myself, because it brought me joy, challenge, and a sense of purpose. As we began our descent into O'Hare, I looked out at the familiar skyline emerging through clouds tinged pink with sunset. Chicago, not the city I'd grown up in, but the one I'd chosen. The one that had chosen me back. Home. My apartment welcomed me with the peculiar stillness of a space that's been empty for 2 weeks. I dropped my suitcases by the door, too jet-lagged to unpack properly, and shuffled to the kitchen for water. A stack of mail sat on the counter, forwarded by the building manager. Bills, advertisements, a postcard from Jade who was studying abroad this semester, and an envelope with handwriting I recognized immediately. Dad's precise, architectural, letter spelling out my name and address. I stared at it, heart suddenly racing. How had he found where I lived? Mina had said she hadn't given him my address. Had he gone through my old mail forwards? Called my former landlord? The thought of him tracking me down sent a confusing mix of emotions through me. Anger at the invasion, but also a grudging recognition of effort. It had taken work to find me. The envelope wasn't thick, just a single sheet of paper inside, most likely. Not a lengthy explanation or apology, then. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened, preserve the distance I'd carefully maintained. But curiosity won out. I tore along the seam and extracted a check. Not a letter, not even a note. Just a check for an amount that made me blink twice to confirm I wasn't hallucinating. $50,000. In the memo line, 2 words. For success. I sat heavily at my kitchen counter, staring at the check like it might burst into flames. What was this supposed to be? A belated recognition of my achievements? Compensation for his absence? A bizarre attempt at reconciliation through money, instead of words? Whatever his intention, the effect was infuriating. As if my worth could be measured in dollars, as if financial support now could erase what had happened, as if a check could substitute for the conversations we needed to have. I reached for my phone, anger propelling my fingers to dial his number, for the first time in nearly a year. It rang once, twice, then his voicemail picked up. Of course. It was the middle of the night back home. "It's Zara," I said after the beep, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "I got your check." "I don't want your money, Dad. I stopped, suddenly unsure what I actually wanted from him. An apology seemed too simple, too inadequate for the complexity between us. "I want you to understand what you did," I continued finally. "And a check doesn't tell me that you do, so thanks, but no thanks. I've built this life without your financial support, and I'll continue to do so." I hung up, still clutching the check. My first instinct was to tear it up, a dramatic gesture of independence. But that felt childish, reactive in a way I was, trying not to be anymore. Instead, I tucked it into a drawer. I'd return it properly, in person, the next time I visited home. Whenever that might be. Life settled back into its rhythm after Singapore. Spring bloomed fully in Chicago, bringing with it an energy that infected the entire city. Sidewalk cafes filled with people soaking up sunshine after the long winter. The lakefront paths teemed with runners, cyclists, and families. Even the L seemed less crowded, as if half the city had decided to walk to work instead. At Vertex, the successful Singapore venture had elevated our team's profile. New projects landed on my desk daily, each more challenging than the last. Dominic had started mentioning leadership training, succession planning. "You've got potential beyond execution," he told me during a performance review. "I want to see you developing strategic vision." One Wednesday in late May, I stayed at the office, long after most people had left, working on a particularly complex proposal. The setting sun cast long shadows across my desk, but I barely noticed, absorbed in the flow of ideas. "Mitchell." Dominic's voice startled me from my concentration. "It's almost 9. I looked up, blinking at the clock on my computer screen. "Sorry, lost track of time." He leaned against the doorframe of my office. I had an actual office now. Small, but with a door that closed. "You've been doing that a lot lately, losing track of time here." Something in his tone made me pause. "Is that a problem? The Singapore follow-up has been more complex than we anticipated, and I wanted to—" "It's not a problem with your work," he interrupted. "It's a question of balance." He gestured around him. "This place, Vertex, the projects, the mission, it matters, but it's not everything." I felt a flicker of defensiveness. "I know that." "Do you?" His gaze was uncomfortably perceptive. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've replaced whatever you were running from with an all-consuming focus on work." The observation hit too close to home. "I'm just dedicated," I said, more sharply than intended. Dominic's expression softened. "I know dedication, Zara. I also know avoidance when I see it." He straightened, heading for the door. "Go home. The proposal will still be here tomorrow." After he left, I sat motionless, his words echoing. Was he right? Had I simply replaced one obsession, proving myself to Dad, with another, proving myself at Vertex? The distinction felt important somehow. I packed up my things and left the building, deciding to walk part of the way home despite the late hour. The city hummed around me, vibrant even at night, Couples strolling hand in hand, friends laughing outside bars, solitary figures walking dogs or lost in thought. All these people with lives beyond their work, with connections, relationships, stories that didn't revolve around proving their worth. When had I last done something purely for enjoyment? Not to advance my career, not to build my resume, not to prove I was thriving despite being rejected? I couldn't remember. The realization followed me home, settled beside me on the couch as I ate takeout and scrolled mindlessly through social media. Pictures of Jade in Barcelona filled my feed, her smile radiant as she stood before Gaudi architecture. New friends crowded around her at beachside cafes. On impulse, I texted her, "When you get back, come visit. For real this time. I'll take time off work." Her response came quickly, despite the time difference. "Finally, booking flights tomorrow." The following weekend, I did something unprecedented. I left my laptop at home and spent an entire Saturday exploring parts of Chicago I'd never seen. The DuSable Museum of African American History, a tiny Vietnamese restaurant in Uptown recommended by a coworker, a community art installation in Pilsen where children were painting a mural about their neighborhood dreams. I took photos not to post online, but to remember the feeling of discovery, of being present in my life rather than racing through it toward some undefined future achievement. That evening, as I sat in a neighborhood park watching the sunset, my phone rang. Dad's number. My stomach clenched, remembering our last interaction, my angry voicemail about the check, which he hadn't responded to in the weeks since. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some combination of the peaceful evening and my recent reflections on connection made me answer. "Hello?" "Zara." His voice sounded different, tentative, lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," I admitted. A pause. "I deserve that." Another pause, longer this time. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the check." I waited, giving him space to continue rather than filling the silence. With my own words? "You were right," he said finally. "Money isn't what you need from me. It's the easy way out, and I took it because the alternative was harder." He took an audible breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not filtered through money or excuses." My heartbeat quickened. "I'm listening." "What happened at the wedding was wrong. I let Elaine make a decision I should have fought against, and then I stood by while my own daughter was escorted out like a stranger." His voice cracked slightly. "I've told myself 100 stories about why I did it, keeping the peace, avoiding a scene, respecting my new wife's wishes. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was a coward." The blunt admission stunned me into silence. "You deserved better," he continued. "You always have. Since your mom died, I've been lost. But that's no excuse for failing you when you needed me most." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I blinked them away, focusing on the horizon where the sun was setting in spectacular oranges and pinks. "Why now?" I asked finally. "It's been almost a year." "Because I saw your name in that article about Vertex's international expansion." Pride crept into his voice. "My daughter, presenting to executives from around the world, and I realized I was missing everything. All your accomplishments, all your growth because of my mistakes." I swallowed hard. "One conversation doesn't fix everything." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not expecting that, but I'm hoping it might be a start." The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky in gradual gradients of blue deepening to purple. In the park, lights flickered on along pathways. Families began packing up picnic blankets. A group of teenagers laughed by the fountain, their voices carrying across the grass. "I'd like that," I said finally. A start. When I returned to my apartment that night, I felt oddly lighter, as if a weight I'd grown accustomed to carrying had shifted slightly. Not disappeared. The hurt was too deep, the breach of trust too significant for that, but adjusted to a more manageable position. I opened the drawer where I'd stashed Dad's check, staring at it with new understanding. It wasn't just an attempt to buy forgiveness. It was the language he knew best. Concrete, tangible support when emotional expression failed him. Misguided, yes, but not malicious. I wouldn't cash it, but I wouldn't return it with anger either. Instead, I reached for my laptop and booked a flight home for the following month. A weekend visit, short enough to retreat if needed, long enough to begin rebuilding whatever might be salvageable between us. As I completed the booking, a notification popped up on my screen. An email from Dominic with the subject line, International Director of Strategic Communications. I opened it to find details of a new position opening at Vertex, a leadership role with global responsibilities, including extended time in our new Singapore office and potential expansion sites in Africa and South America. Consider this advance. Notice, Dominic had written, position won't be posted for 3 months, but when it is, I expect your application on my desk. You're ready. I stared at the screen, mind racing with possibilities. A true leadership role, international assignment, the career trajectory I'd dreamed of accelerating faster than I'd imagined possible. And yet, as exciting as the opportunity was, it didn't fill me with the desperate need to prove myself that might have consumed me 6 months ago. Instead, I felt something calmer, professional ambition balanced with personal perspective. I closed the laptop without responding to Dominic's email. Tomorrow would be time enough for career planning. Tonight was for acknowledging how far I'd come, not just professionally, but personally. From the devastated girl ejected from her father's wedding to a woman building a multifaceted life on her own terms. The journey wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be. But for the first time, I felt truly confident that I was moving in the right direction. Not running from pain, but walking toward possibility. 3 years can transform everything. I stood at the window of my corner office on the 34th floor of Vertex Tower, watching Chicago spread out beneath me like a living map. Summer sun glinted off the lake to the east, sailboats dotting the blue expanse like tiny white brush strokes. Below, Michigan Avenue teemed with tourists and locals alike, the energy of the city palpable even from this height. Ms. Mitchell? My assistant, Kai, appeared at the door. Your 2 o'clock is here and Singapore is on the line for your 3:30 call. I nodded, straightening the lapels of my tailored blazer. Tell Singapore I'll be ready, and please show Mr. Reynolds in. As Kai departed, I took a moment to center myself, taking in the space I now commanded. Awards lined one wall, industry recognition for campaigns I'd led across 3 continents. Photos from project launches in Kenya, Brazil, and Indonesia adorned another. My desk, sleek, modern, meticulously organized, held a single personal item, the compass pendant I'd purchased in Singapore 3 years ago, now mounted in a small glass case. International Director of Strategic Communications. The title still sent a small thrill through me each time I saw it on my business cards or heard it announced at conferences. Not bad for a barista who'd fled to Chicago with nothing but determination. And 2 suitcases. The next hours passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and strategic decisions. My team, 15 people spread across 4 countries, needed guidance on messaging for our newest water purification system. Investors wanted reassurance about expansion timelines. The development team required communication support for an upcoming climate summit. I navigated it all with a calm efficiency that had become my trademark at Vertex. Mitchell doesn't panic had become something of a company mantra during crises. It was nearly 7 when Dominic appeared in my doorway, leaning against the frame with the casual authority that hadn't changed in the years I'd known him. His hair had gone fully silver now, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but his penetrating gaze remained the same. Working late again? He asked, though there was no criticism in his tone. Our relationship had evolved from mentor-mentee to something closer to equals, especially since my promotion had placed me on the executive team alongside him. Just finishing the Singapore briefing, I said, gesturing to my tablet. Their regulatory questions deserve thorough answers. He nodded approvingly. The board was impressed with your quarterly presentation, especially the expansion projections. They should be. We're ahead of schedule on every metric. Dominic studied me for a moment. Have dinner with me and Amara? We're trying that new place on Randolph. I hesitated, glancing at my calendar. I should really finalize these briefing notes. They'll wait until morning, he said firmly. Some things are still more important than Vertex, Mitchell, even for workaholic executive directors. I smiled, recognizing the gentle reminder for what it was. Work-life balance remained an ongoing negotiation with myself, one that Dominic never hesitated to weigh in on when he felt I was tipping too far toward all work, no life. Give me 15 minutes to wrap this up. Later, seated at a corner table in the city's newest culinary hotspot, I relaxed into conversation with the two people who had become not just colleagues but genuine friends. Amara, now VP of Global Partnerships, recounted a disastrous meeting in Tokyo with such perfect comedic timing that wine nearly came out my nose. Dominic shared stories from his early career failures with the self-deprecating humor of someone secure enough in his success to acknowledge the messy path that led there. So, Amara said once the main courses had been cleared, are you ready for next week's homecoming? I took a slow sip of wine. As ready as I'll ever be. Dominic raised an eyebrow. The prodigal daughter returns in triumph, complete with private jet. It's practically biblical. I laughed despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. Hardly. Biblical. Just a company asset being utilized for a quick detour. A Vertex jet landing in your hometown, where you'll be keynoting their economic development conference, Amara corrected. After they practically begged you to come, I'd call that a triumph. She wasn't wrong. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, formal, embossed, addressed to me at Vertex headquarters. The annual Economic Innovation Summit in my hometown had grown from a local business gathering to a regional event attracting investors and entrepreneurs from across the state, and they wanted me, a hometown success story, to deliver the keynote address. My initial instinct had been to decline. Despite the gradual rebuilding of my relationship with Dad over the past 3 years, weekend visits, holiday gatherings, increasingly honest conversations, returning as some kind of conquering hero felt complicated. But Dominic had pushed me to accept. It's not about proving anything to anyone, he'd said. It's about closing a circle. So I'd said yes. And now, with the event just a week away, the complex emotions I'd been suppressing were bubbling to the surface. Have you told your father you're coming in on the company jet? Amara asked, always perceptive about the things I didn't say. I shook my head. He knows I'm speaking at the summit. That's enough for now. The truth was more complicated. Dad and I had reached a careful peace over the years. Not the same relationship we'd had before Mom died, but something new, built on more honest foundations. He'd apologized, multiple times and in multiple ways, for the wedding incident. I'd gradually let go of the white-hot anger that had propelled me to Chicago. But some part of me, a part I wasn't entirely proud of, wanted the moment of revelation. Dad seeing the Vertex jet land, understanding the full extent of what I'd built without him. It was petty, perhaps, this desire for a cinematic moment of vindication. But it was honest. Well, I for one can't wait to hear about the looks on their faces, Dominic said, raising his glass, to closing circles and opening new ones. We clinked glasses, and I let the conversation drift to lighter topics. But as the evening wound down, my thoughts remained on the journey ahead, not just the physical travel, but the emotional territory I was preparing to navigate. The week passed, in a flurry of preparation, both professional and personal. By day, I refined my keynote address, weaving together my professional expertise with elements of my personal journey in a way that I hoped would resonate without feeling exploitative of my own story. By night, I sorted through what to pack, how to present myself in a town where people might still remember me as the barista who fled after being thrown out of her father's wedding. The morning of departure dawned clear and crisp, a perfect Chicago fall day. I arrived at the private airfield where Vertex kept its small fleet, a sleek overnight bag in one hand, briefcase in the other. The jet gleamed in the morning sun, not ostentatious but undeniably impressive, with the Vertex logo emblazoned on its tail. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," the pilot greeted me at the stairs. "Beautiful day for flying." I smiled, handing him my bags before ascending into the cabin. Inside, the space was elegantly appointed, cream leather seats, polished wood accents, every amenity thoughtfully provided. I settled into a window seat, watching the ground crew complete their final checks. As the engines hummed to life and we began taxiing toward the runway, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever happened in the next 48 hours, I was no longer the wounded girl who had fled her hometown. I was arriving as myself, a self I had built deliberately, choice by choice, achievement by achievement. The flight was smooth, giving me time to review my presentation notes and respond to a few urgent emails. But as we began our descent, I set work aside and gazed out the window at the familiar landscape emerging below, the river cutting through downtown, the surrounding hills, the neighborhoods where I'd grown up. It looked simultaneously exactly as I remembered and completely foreign, like a photograph that had been subtly altered while I wasn't looking. The jet touched down with barely a bump, taxiing toward the small terminal where I could see a welcoming committee gathered. My stomach tightened. I hadn't expected anyone to meet me at the airfield. I'd planned to take a car to my hotel, settle in, perhaps call Dad to let him know I'd arrived. But as we rolled to a stop and the engines quieted, I could see them clearly through the window. Mayor Wilson, whom I recognized from the summit materials. Several people in business attire who must be from the Economic Development Committee, and, to my complete shock, Dad. He stood slightly apart from the official greeting party, hands clasped behind his back, silver hair catching the sunlight. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the careful neutrality of his expression. He knew. Somehow he knew I was arriving on the Vertex jet. The cabin door opened, stairs were positioned, and I took a deep breath before emerging into the crisp autumn air. Sunlight momentarily blinded me as flashbulbs popped. Local. Press, documenting the arrival of the summit's keynote speaker. "Ms. Mitchell, welcome back to Springfield." Mayor Wilson stepped forward, hand extended. "We're honored to have you return as our keynote speaker." I shook his hand, summoning my professional smile. "The honor is mine, Mayor. Thank you for the invitation." Introductions to the committee members followed, a blur of names and titles and enthusiastic handshakes. All the while, I was acutely aware of Dad standing quietly at the edge of the group, watching. Finally, the official welcome concluded, and the committee members stepped back, giving us space. I turned to face him, unsure what to expect. "Hello, Dad." He looked older than when I'd last seen him at Christmas, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly more stooped. But his eyes were clear, holding mine without flinching. "Zara." His voice was steady. "Quite an entrance." I glanced back at the jet, the Vertex logo catching the light. It wasn't meant to be a statement. Wasn't it? A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, surprising me. "It's all right if it was. You've earned it." Something in his tone, not resentment or defensiveness, but a simple acknowledgement, caught me off guard. I'd prepared for so many potential reactions: awkwardness, performative pride, even lingering anger, but not this quiet acceptance. How did you know I was coming in on the company jet? I asked as we walked toward the parking area, the welcoming committee having discreetly moved ahead to give us privacy. Mina mentioned you were arriving by private plane. He shrugged. Wasn't hard to connect the dots. We reached his car, the same sensible sedan he'd driven for years, and he opened the passenger door for me. I thought you might want a ride to your hotel, he said. Unless you've arranged other transportation? No, this is perfect. Thank you. As we drove through familiar streets, a strange sense of displacement washed over me. The cognitive dissonance of seeing unchanged landmarks through eyes that had witnessed so much since I'd left. The coffee shop where I'd worked still stood on the corner, its awning more faded now. The park where I'd sat after being ejected from the wedding remained green and peaceful. The high school, the library, the old movie theater, all exactly as I remembered, yet somehow smaller, less significant. Town hasn't changed much, Dad said, following my gaze. No, I agreed, but I have. He nodded, eyes on the road. Yes, you have. We lapsed into silence for several blocks, the unspoken weight of our history filling the car. I looked at his profile, the strong jaw I'd inherited, the deep crease between his brows that appeared when he was thinking hard. The father who had once been my hero, then my deepest disappointment, and now something more complicated. I'm proud of you, Zara, he said suddenly, still looking straight ahead. Not because of the private jet or the fancy title, because you did exactly what you said you would do that night. You built something meaningful. On your terms. The words pierced something in me, a lingering doubt I hadn't realized I still carried. You remember what I said? Every word. He pulled into the hotel driveway, putting the car in park but making no move to get out. You said, watch me, just watch what I become without you. And I have been watching, even when you didn't know it. My throat tightened. Dad, let me finish. He turned to face me fully now. I failed you, catastrophically, on what should have been a day of family celebration, and instead of apologizing, really apologizing, I let you go. Watched you leave town with 2 suitcases and more courage than I've ever had. His voice roughened. It's the biggest regret of my life. I sat very still, absorbing his words. We'd circled this topic before in our careful reconciliation attempts over the years. Apologies offered and accepted, explanations given and acknowledged. But never with this raw clarity. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you're coming back as the success story of this town. His smile was sad but genuine. And I want to make sure you know that I would be just as proud if you'd returned driving a beat-up Honda and working a regular job. Because you would still be you, strong, determined, principled. The qualities that made you rebuild your life are the same ones I've always admired, long before Vertex or corner offices. Something shifted in my chest, a knot loosening, a weight I'd grown so accustomed to carrying that I'd forgotten it was there. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded once, decisively, then got out to retrieve my bag from the trunk. At the hotel entrance, he hesitated. Elaine and I would like to have you for dinner tomorrow night, after your speech, if you're free. The invitation hung between us, freighted with history. The last time I'd been invited to an event involving Elaine, it had ended with security escorting me out. We'd seen each other a handful of times in the intervening years, stilted holiday gatherings, a few carefully orchestrated meetings, civil, but never comfortable. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. Good, that's good. After he left, I checked into my room, a spacious suite with views of the town square, courtesy of the summit organizers. I unpacked methodically, hanging my presentation outfit in the closet, arranging my toiletries in the bathroom. Normal actions that felt surreal in this context, in this town where I'd once felt so utterly rejected. My phone buzzed with a text from Amara. Landed safely? Town still standing after the triumphant return? I smiled, typing. Back? Landed, town intact. Nothing quite as dramatic as we imagined. Her response came quickly. Disappointed. Was hoping for groveling townspeople and perhaps a parade. How's your dad? I stared at the question, considering how to answer. Finally, I wrote. Different. In a good way. I think we both are. That evening, I declined invitations to pre-summit cocktail events, choosing instead to walk through my old neighborhood as dusk settled over the town. The air was crisp with autumn, leaves crunching beneath my boots as I traced paths I'd walked thousands of times in another life. Past the elementary school where I'd learned to read. Past the corner where I'd fallen off my bike and broken my arm at 9. Past the movie theater where I'd had my first kiss at 16. Each landmark a chapter in the story that had shaped me, for better or worse. I paused outside my childhood home, a modest 2-story with the same blue shutters, though the front garden had been replanted with different flowers than Mom had chosen. Dad and Elaine had moved to a newer development across town a year after. Their wedding, selling this house with its 2 heavy memories. Standing there in the gathering darkness, I felt a strange peace settle over me. I had loved this place once, had been hurt in it, had grown in it, had eventually fled from it. But it held no power over me now. It was simply a house, a structure of wood and brick and glass. The pain and joy it had witnessed were carried now in my memory, not in these walls. I continued walking until I reached the hotel again. My thoughts, quieter than they had been in weeks. The summit morning dawned bright and clear. I dressed with careful attention, a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation, the compass pendant around my neck as a private reminder of how far I'd come. In the mirror, I saw a woman who looked confidently back at me, poised, prepared, purposeful. The convention center ballroom was filled to capacity when I arrived. Local business owners, regional investors, politicians, press, and citizens all gathered to hear about economic innovation. In the front row, I spotted Dad, and beside him, Elaine. She caught my eye and offered a small, tentative smile. I nodded in acknowledgement before being whisked backstage for final preparations. Ready? The event coordinator asked, adjusting my microphone. I took a deep breath. Ready. When they announced my name, the applause was thunderous, hometown pride mixed with genuine interest in what I had to say. I walked onto the stage with measured steps, taking my place at the podium as the lights brightened and hundreds of faces turned expectantly toward me. Thank you, I began, voice steady and clear. It's a particular honor to return to the place where my journey began. For the next 40 minutes, I spoke about innovation, about sustainable business practices, about Vertex's mission to transform access to clean water globally. I shared case studies and statistics, strategies and forecasts, the professional content I'd been invited to deliver. But I also wove in elements of my personal journey, not the specific pain of rejection, but the universal experience of facing obstacles and finding new paths forward. Resilience isn't just a business strategy, I told the rapt audience. It's a human quality that we all possess, though sometimes we discover it only when every other option has been stripped away. The willingness to begin again, to rebuild, to see failure not as an endpoint, but as a redirection. From the front row, Dad watched me intently, his expression a complex mix of pride and something deeper, perhaps recognition of the indirect, reference to our shared history. The most powerful innovation often emerges from our most difficult moments, I continued, when we're forced to reimagine possibilities, to create new paths where none existed before. This is true for individuals, for communities, and for organizations. As I concluded my address, the applause rose again, People standing to offer appreciation, not just for my professional insights, but for the glimpse of authentic experience beneath them. I acknowledged the ovation with a grateful nod, then stepped away from the podium as the summit director took my place to introduce the next segment. Backstage, congratulatory handshakes and business cards awaited me. Local entrepreneurs hoping for connections, regional officials interested in partnerships. I navigated these professional interactions with practiced ease, knowing they were an important part of why I'd been invited. But my attention was divided, part of me still processing what it had felt like to stand on that stage in my hometown, not as the rejected daughter fleeing with 2 suitcases, but as a woman whose achievements had brought her back on her own terms. When the morning sessions concluded, I found Dad waiting in the lobby, alone. Elaine had a volunteer commitment, he explained, but she'll join us for dinner tonight. Your speech was exceptional, he added as we walked toward the exit. Not that I'm surprised. I smiled. Thank you. It felt significant, being up there. He nodded, understanding the layers beneath my words. Full circle. The rest of the day passed in a blur of summit activities, panel discussions, networking lunches, meetings with local business leaders interested in Vertex's approaches. By the time evening arrived, I was professionally satisfied but emotionally drained, the constant navigation between my current identity and my past history taking its toll. Dad's text arrived as I was changing for dinner. We're thinking something. Casual at home, if that works for you. Elaine's making her lasagna. The prospect of a quiet meal instead of another public appearance was immediately appealing. I texted back my agreement and the address, then changed from my business attire into simple dark jeans and a soft cashmere sweater. Their home was in a newer development on the north side of town, contemporary architecture with clean lines and large windows. As I pulled into the driveway, I noted the thoughtful landscaping, the warm glow of lights from within. A far cry from the childhood home with its weight of memories. Dad opened the door before I could knock, welcoming me with a brief but genuine hug. Inside, the space reflected both his architectural sensibilities and Elaine's more colorful aesthetic, a harmonious blending I wouldn't have thought possible years ago. Elaine emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Zara, thank you for coming. Her voice held none of the sharp edges I remembered from our early interactions, just a careful warmth. Thank you for having me, I replied, offering the bottle of wine I'd brought. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable, the food excellent, the conversation flowing more easily than I'd anticipated. We talked about the summit, about Vertex's international expansion, about Dad's recent semi-retirement from his architectural firm. Elaine shared stories about her volunteer work with literacy programs at the local elementary school. It wasn't until dessert, homemade apple tart with vanilla ice cream, that the conversation turned more personal. I saw the article about you in Business Week, Dad said, refilling my wine glass. The profile about your work in Kenya. They called you a visionary leader. I smiled, a little embarrassed. Journalists like their superlatives. They weren't wrong, he insisted. What you're building at Vertex? It matters. It's changing. Lives. That's the goal, I acknowledged. Though some days it feels like we're just scratching the surface of what needs to be done. That's how meaningful work always feels, Elaine said unexpectedly. Never finished, never quite enough, but still worth doing. I looked at her with new interest, recognizing a depth I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Yes, exactly like that. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the clink of forks against plates. Through the dining room window, I could see stars emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed my departure years ago, my vow to build something from nothing. I have something for you, Dad said suddenly, rising from the table. I've been waiting for the right moment. He disappeared into another room, returning with a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with inlaid detail along the edges. He placed it before me with unusual solemnity. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on dark blue velvet, lay a key, old-fashioned brass, clearly not for any modern lock. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at him. Dad sat down again, his expression serious. "It's the key to the workshop behind Grandpa's old hunting cabin, the one where he taught me to build things when I was a boy." I remembered the cabin, though I'd only visited a few times. A small structure on 50 acres of woodland that had been in our family for generations. "After you left," Dad continued, "I spent a lot of time there, thinking, remembering who I used to be before grief and fear made me someone I didn't recognize." He paused. "I decided then that someday, if you ever allowed me back into your life, I would give you the key. As a symbol." "Of what?" I asked softly. "Of building things that last, of legacy, of the skills we pass down, the values we inherit." His eyes held mine. "The cabin and land are yours now. The deed was transferred to your name last week." I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, I can't accept." "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you should. Not as compensation. Nothing could compensate for what happened, but as acknowledgement that some bonds, even when strained, even when broken, can be rebuilt. Different, but perhaps stronger for having been tested." I lifted the key from its velvet nest, feeling its weight in my palm, solid, substantial, a tangible connection to a past that predated our fracture and might now extend into a future neither of us had imagined possible. "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate, but sincere. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I stood at the window gazing out at the town where I'd once felt so betrayed, so abandoned. The streets were quiet now, most windows dark, the occasional car passing like a ghost beneath streetlights. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "How went the triumphant return? Board meeting moved to Thursday. Singapore team needs final approval on campaign materials." The message was a reminder of my other life, the one waiting for me in Chicago, in Singapore, in all the places Vertex's mission extended. The career I'd built, the impact I was making, the future still unfolding before me. I typed back, "Return more healing than triumphant. Details when I'm back. We'll review Singapore materials." On the flight home. Placing the phone on the nightstand, I took out the key Dad had given me, turning it over in my fingers. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new beginning. A recognition that sometimes the journey back to what matters requires first journeying away, far enough to gain perspective, to build strength, to become the person who can return not in defeat, but in wholeness. Tomorrow, the Vertex jet would carry me back to Chicago, back to the life I'd constructed with such deliberate care. But I would return different than I'd arrived, carrying not just the success I'd achieved, but the reconciliation I'd never quite believed possible. The private jet that had once symbolized my ultimate "I'll show them" moment had become, instead, the vehicle for a different kind of homecoming. One where triumph mattered less than healing, where proving my worth had given way to simply living. I placed the key on the bedside table next to my compass pendant, twin symbols of direction found and foundation secured. Whatever came next in my story, these talismans would remind me of essential truths. That pain can be a catalyst for growth, that rejection can lead to reinvention, and that sometimes the most powerful statement isn't arriving in a blaze of vindication, but in the quiet strength to build bridges where once there were only walls. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.